going to move all of her furniture in a U-Haul down to Miami Beach. And I said, the Atlanta Symphony audition's on the way. I don't really have any chance of winning because, but if you drive past an audition and not take it, it's pretty stupid. You might as well just for the experience. So I pulled up behind Symphony Hall in a U-Haul, and I pulled up the roll top back and pulled out my bass and went and kind of won a little bit.
Today's conversation was a ton of fun for me, long overdue for sure. I'm Jason Heath. This is Contrabass Conversations, and we are talking today with Michael Kurth, who has been a member of the Atlanta Symphony since the 90s and is also a composer. He's had several pieces commissioned and performed by many major orchestras, including the Atlanta Symphony, and is just a super interesting person. We talk about all sorts of things, including a very entertaining Atlanta Symphony audition story. You can probably relate if you have taken orchestra auditions. His composing, when he composes, I find that super interesting, and it makes me feel very lazy. And if you want to check out some of his compositions, definitely go to his website, which we have linked up. Also check out his many, many titles for double bass in our sheet music store, which we will also have linked up for this episode. A quick shout out to our sponsors, Dorico, Ear Trumpet Labs, Practisma, and Modacity. More on them later, but let's get into this conversation with Michael Kurth. So you were in New World early 90s, right? Like 93 or something like that?
Yeah, one season from 93 to 94 with, with Matt Frischman from Minnesota and Bob D'Imperio from Kennedy Center and Paul Unger from Fort Worth and who else? Rob Astrup, who was in Tenerife, and who else was there? Shigeru Ishikawa, and he had that little pear-shaped old, like a Madi kind of bass. And who else was there? Richard Warren from, I think, do you know Richard? He's out from your way, isn't he?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I've spent some time. I didn't realize he was in New World. I've actually gotten together with him a few times out here. He lives 2 miles from me, something like that.
Oh, neat. Tell him I said hey.
Okay, I will.
Tell him I remember shooting off bottle rockets at the parked cars out of his window.
Okay, that sounds about right. That sounds right in line with the Richard I've met.
Yeah.
Wow, it's so cool to see where people go when you're in a cohort like that. Like that second Spoleto Charleston, and I wish I'd done the Italy one, but that second Spoleto Charleston summer, the bass section, let me see if I can remember. Kristen Bruyere was there, so Minnesota. Scott Pingle, and that was the year he won the Charleston job, and then the San Francisco Symphony. Andy Anderson, who's in Lyric. Everybody except me got a job. So,
and they're all jealous of you now.
Well, yeah, now I do. Well, I've been planning for a pandemic for years is the line I've been using. but yeah, I was curious. So this guy must have not been there when you were there, but a clarinetist named Todd Nico was in New World. I bet he was gone before you got there, because didn't it start in like 89, not around there?
I think so. Yes. Yeah. Maybe 80. Even maybe a little earlier, I'm not sure.
Okay. He was there the first few years, and my old bass teacher, Michael Hovnanian from the Chicago Symphony, he had some great stories of visiting people in like late 80s, early 90s, and Miami Beach. The grittiness of Miami Beach, I think, was greater then. I remember he was talking about like they found a dead body behind the hotel where people were staying.
Yeah. Yeah, we had a neighborhood full of characters. We had Bent Guy, who would walk around bent over all the time. We had Cat Lady, who we found out was later found out was a guy, who we later found out he was a girl, who fed all the stray cats on put out little piles of cat kibble on little pages torn out of romance novels. You see little grease stained romance novel pages all over the neighborhood. Pretty interesting place in the early 90s. Yeah.
I'll bet. Now, because you're from Baltimore, right? And then you went to Peabody. Had you spent a lot of time in South Florida or before you went to New World, or was that kind of like the first time?
No, the typical Disney World trips with my parents when I was little, but yeah, grew up near Baltimore. Well, studied with Hal in high school and then continued with Hal at Peabody.
Yeah.
And then since I left Peabody and went to New World for a season and then got to Atlanta.
Okay. It seems like people go one of two ways at New World. This might be different now, but back when I was subbing in the late 90s and that kind of thing, and it seemed like people either they went full on Miami Beach and just like, didn't practice that much and did that, or kind of went the other way and just locked themselves inside and ignored the beach.
That was me. Yeah, I went to the beach one time the entire season.
Well, I wondered very often if I had ended up at New World, what I would have done, because I'm from South Dakota, lived in Chicago then for forever, and I remember going down to Miami, and it was the Super Bowl that year in Miami, and I get off the plane, it's like 15 degrees in Chicago, 80 in Miami, and I remember talking to one of the bassists there, and he's like in shorts and like I don't know what that Jason would have done. I was so obsessed with palm trees at that point in my life. I thought all I want to do is get to palm trees. And now I live in there's a palm tree right there. I don't even look at it. Here in San Francisco.
Yeah. One other guy that was down there, Tony Monzo. He used to ride rollerblades to down Washington Avenue to the hall.
Wow!
In his tuxedo.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. I had Tony on the podcast maybe 2-3 years ago. He was coming through town because he plays in the New Century Chamber Orchestra here in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. And so it was fun to do an interview and hang out. And I was doing interviews outside at that point in this quirky little park. And you want to talk about characters like Bent Guy and that sort of thing. This part of San Francisco, there are lots of characters. And then when you pull out a couple of microphones and start talking to a recorder, it's
sure.
I need to put a video camera on me the next time so that people can see the setting. Well,
Yeah. Tony, trivia here, he could climb a palm tree barehanded.
What? Really?
Yeah, like Mowgli, kind of like just like a monkey. Not sure if he can still do that.
So you have a great Atlanta Symphony audition story that you got a clip on your website from somebody at the ASO interviewing you, I think. Mm-hmm. Can you tell that story, because it's a good one?
Yeah, that's one of my less embarrassing audition stories.
Okay.
But that one, yeah, I was traveling. Let me think how it goes. My first wife and I we were engaged at that time, and we had about to get married, and I was ready to move. We were going to move all of her furniture in a U-Haul down to Miami Beach. And I said, the Atlanta Symphony audition's on the way. I don't really have any chance of winning because, but if you drive past an audition and not take it, it's pretty stupid. You might as well just for the experience. So I pulled up behind Symphony Hall in a U-Haul, and I pulled up the roll top back and pulled out my bass and went and kind of won a little bit. And they weren't ready to hire me yet. They didn't offer me a contract, but I had won the audition that day, and they said, so anyway, they took some recommendations from the personnel manager. He said, put your stuff in storage, go down to Miami and get the rest of your stuff and bring it back, because you're probably going to be working here next year. So,
wow. That reminds me. I've had some of those drive-by auditions, and none of them did I win. But I remember I was driving from playing in that chamber orchestra in Memphis. I was driving back to Chicago, and there was a Kansas City audition, and I'm driving, and I was not ready for this audition, and I thought, it'd be so easy to just keep driving, but I'll lose my $50 if I don't go play the audition. And that was one of those like particularly bad auditions. I think that might have been my last audition, and I got back on the freeway and I thought, why did I do that? I would have paid like $500 not to have that experience. I was in a dark place, but
the experience is the best teacher, though, isn't it? And you always learn something from it.
Yeah, it's true. It's hard to know that in the moment because it's everything looks much neater in the rearview mirror, at least for me.
Yeah. Well, what did I learn from this one? I learned never to come here again. That was There are other auditions that I learned a lot from in much later in retrospect. But Atlanta was a lucky one. It seems like, honestly, I've only ever won 2 orchestral auditions, New World and Atlanta, and I've having taken maybe 20 over the years. And of course, I don't audition anymore. It's I'm not really a competitive player. These kids now can play circles around me, but I think I won New World because I didn't think I had any chance of losing, and I think I won Atlanta because I didn't think I had any chance of winning.
Isn't that interesting? Wow.
Anywhere in the middle, if there's an element of risk, it kind of makes you too nervous to play, I think. But if you have no reason to be nervous, either because you're ready or you're not ready, then nerves aren't an issue, I guess.
It's been so interesting to see people younger than me, and I think we're roughly the same vintage, move through auditions. Because I remember thinking back in the early 90s, like, wow, it's so impossible now. I wonder what it was like back in the early 80s, and now you look in like the late, 20 teens or 2020, I guess, whatever. It's been so interesting. I've had a few students that were my middle school and high school students now go off and they're in professional orchestras. And it was so interesting to then talk to them about learning those lessons and like developing those audition skills as someone who never like really got it together, made it into the finals. And then like every audition I did worse, it seems like for a while. And I know it's all up in the head, but it's been interesting to see people like a generation later than me kind of go through that process and understand it.
It's also really interesting to sit on audition committees in Atlanta, because I've been on 3 or 4 over the years, having hired, actually I wasn't on Joe Conyers' audition committee. That was kind of I skipped that one because there's some health things going on. Then I was on for, when Colin Corner won principal bass, and he's now in Oregon. And when we hired Joe McFadden for section, and when we hired Joe McFadden for principal, and also when we had a principal audition where no one was hired, I think a few years ago. Sitting on audition committees is really, really enlightening for me. Yeah. And I learn, I have a lot of new insight into what is important for me as an orchestral musician in a colleague.
What is important? I would love to know.
I don't care if you come on stage and tune or warm up or play a few notes. I don't care if you take too long between excerpts. I don't care if you make a mistake here or there. Honestly, if you can deliver, it's pretty obvious. I want to hear flexibility. I want to hear good stroke, good rhythm, good tone. My favorite thing, I call it the turkey slap, is if I get to pick or recommend what excerpts we hear first, I always ask for something weird first. Never like Beethoven 5 scherzo. That's just too easy. And honestly, the past few lists, I've campaigned for not including the Beethoven 9 recitatives at all, because everybody knows them. High school kids can play those as well as I can at this point. It doesn't really show anything, and it takes forever to hear.
Yeah, that's true.
So if we're going to hear, the first thing I want to hear is maybe the first page of Mahler 2, or Brahms 1 letter E. Something with a lot of details. And if I guess my technique as a judge is to sit there, assume everybody has 100% when they come in, and start deducting for everything they miss. Which is kind of harsh, but in another respect, it's kind of charitable, because everybody comes in with the benefit of the doubt. I think you can play the bass. You're here. You took the time to get here. Now all you have to do is do it. All I have to do is hear you play the details. If you can play every sforzando and accent and dotted quarter and not dotted quarter in Brahms 1, you miss a note here or there, it's okay, because I do too. But I know how to play that excerpt. Yeah. And if you do too, you get into the finals. It's pretty basic.
This episode is brought to you by Dorico, the advanced music notation software by Steinberg. And here is Senior Product Manager Daniel Spreadbury on the challenges of designing music notation software.
I think one of the things about a music notation software is that it has so many jobs to do, because it's serving such a wide range of users. Whether you're a high school teacher, or you're a student, or you're a composer doing concert music, or you're doing a jazz chart, or you're doing movie music, or you're doing an audio mock-up for a job, or a music -1 rehearsal track for your ensemble, or whatever it is. The jobs to be done, they cross, this enormous horizon.
I am a huge fan of Dorico. I use it every single day. There's a free version you can check out that lets you do practically everything up to 2 parts. So if you're doing exercises or bass duets or anything like that, that will meet your needs, and you can check out the other options as well. Dorico.com will take you there, and thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast. This episode is brought to you by Ear Trumpet Labs. These are hand-built microphones out of Portland, Oregon, and they make an excellent mic for upright bass called Nadine. Barry Green got to try out this mic at our 2020 online bass summit, where Ear Trumpet Labs was a sponsor, and he was singing its praises all weekend long. It's an instrument-mounted condenser mic with an incredibly clear, natural sound and great feedback rejection. It's durable and works with in-ears, monitors, you name it. Not to mention, Christian McBride, Barry Bales, and Missy Raines are all Nadine users. Whether it's classical, jazz, Americana, or bluegrass, this mic seriously delivers, and they're offering a free t-shirt, especially to Contrabass Conversations listeners, with a purchase of a mic. Just visit www.eartrumpetlabs.com/contrabass to claim yours and check out Nadine. Well, it's interesting because I remember talking with my former teacher, Michael Hovnanian, and he sort of expressed the exact same sentiments for Chicago Symphony auditions. He said everybody walks in with 100%, and I think that's an easy thing for people to not realize. Like, you want to hear good playing, you want people to do well. No one's sitting there like wanting bad. Like, no one wants bad playing, but it's a tough thing from the other side of the screen. I know, and from personal experience and talking to people.
Yeah, for sure. But if I think I would call myself a seasoned player at this point. I'm like 49 years old, I think, something like that. Yeah, 49 this year. So I've played a lot of stuff, and I think if I had to take an audition now against some kid right out of college, I would hope that the audition would include everything in the entire repertoire, like the longest list possible, including sight reading. Because I've played all this, and they could probably play the chief excerpts better than me. But if you ask for something obscure,
right.
like I know it because it's just when you've played this long and this many years with an orchestra and this much repertoire, it's just it builds your own personal core repertoire and your skills that more so than I think woodshedding Beethoven non-recitative for 10 hours a day in college does.
Right. And there's no way to build those skills except being on the job, right? I mean, I remember, so this season or the last season, I guess, lost track of time, San Francisco Symphony. So Dan Smith is the latest, he's the associate principal in SF Symphony. And there was Nielsen has been a popular composer over the years here. And so Nielsen 5 was on the calendar. It was played. It was in February, and I got called to play, and I actually declined because I had like all this stuff around that, like I was going to be out of town before and after. I thought, what does my life look like with Nielsen 5 in my life or not? And so
right. No sleep, no eat, just practice. That's all.
Right. And so Dan, this is his first professional job, and I think he's 2 or 3 years on the job, but everything's still new at that point, right? And so the advice from one of the more seasoned players in the section was, he said, "What should I focus on? What's coming?" They're like, Nielsen 5. So man, I was there the week before Nielsen 5, and I think 2 weeks before Nielsen 5, and all I heard from the orchestra backstage was Nielsen 5.
Yep. I mean, there's some pieces that, like, no matter how experienced you are, they're like sight reading every time you play them. No matter how much you woodshed the stuff, it's always awful. And Nielsen's some of that.
Well, I was talking to Dave Kreibel, I'm sorry, Dave, if I'm butchering your name and you're listening, but he was hired French horn by Fritz Reiner in the early 50s. And and then he went to Detroit in the mid 60s and then became principal horn of San Francisco Symphony in the mid 70s. And he retired like 20 years ago, but just put out a book about his exploits and pranks. And it's a great book, but just, he told me, and I'd love to know if you've thought about this at all, like Nielsen, because I brought up Nielsen. I don't know how the heck Nielsen came out. Oh, it's because San Francisco did all these recordings of Nielsen. And he said that what he understood was that Nielsen 1, they get harder and harder because Nielsen wasn't getting the attention he thought he should get. And so he thought by like making tougher and tougher works. Have you ever heard that or speculated on that?
No. I try to avoid Nielsen as much as possible, honestly.
Well, he's one of those composers that I, at least as a listener, I enjoy listening to it. It doesn't sound like it is but it's such a traumatic experience in the orchestra. I've never played in an orchestra like Atlanta played Nielsen, but I used to play in a gig orchestra called the Elgin Symphony. And I think the most stressful concert I ever had was Nielsen 5, Nielsen Clarinet Concerto, and some like crazy Nielsen overture. And that was like, everybody looked like they'd been through battle by the end of that week.
Yeah. Red badge of courage. They pin the Purple Heart right on you there for playing. You survived Nielsen.
Yeah. So when did you start composing? When did that? Was it when you were a kid or later in life? A
little bit when I was a kid, here and there. But then I got really busy with trying to get a job and have kids and stuff. But then once the kids are a little older, really started composing in earnest about maybe 15 years ago.
Okay. Wow. Had you studied composition at Peabody or?
Very little. I mean, I took a class or sort of like a semi-private lesson for about a year with a guy named Tom Benjamin, who was a good teacher, but he didn't have much hope in me. I like to compose when I'm inspired and didn't really like deadlines. And he said, when you're a composer, you have to put in the work, whether you're inspired or not, basically.
Well, so what inspired you to, because like now I look at what you've put out, and certainly just with what you've done with our sheet music store that we just launched a couple of days ago, it's like incredible. I'm like, my goodness, the output. And then I'm just going through your website and everything that the Atlanta Symphony's played, other orchestras have played. I mean, it's incredible, the body of work you've put out in 15 years. Wow.
Well, I think, somebody asked me once in a composer interview, how do you find balance? Mm-hmm. And I assume they meant between like work and rest or work and play or whatever. And for me, two things. I'll rest when I'm dead, and work is play. Play is work. Because I love this so much, doing it, playing and arranging and writing. It's not work to me. It's really, if you find something you love to do and get somebody to pay you to do it, it's heaven, Yeah. And then I think my response to the balance question was, I don't find balance. Balance will find me if it needs to. It knows where to find me if it has to. But otherwise, balance can stay the heck away.
Yeah. No, I know. Well, my wife would echo similar sentiments about what I do. I go down these rabbit holes, and right now I'm trying to make these videos of the lives of the great composers, but make them stupid as possible. So I've been cutting the heads off of composers and putting them on bodies and animating them and having them run around. And these have not been aired publicly yet, but I find myself waking up at 5 a.m. on a Sunday and like sitting at the computer like a ghoul, like moving these things around.
You should totally do the Dragonetti thing with the dolls and stuff.
Oh, I know. Well, it's funny because I put out this video about Dragonetti, but it was really a review of Bob Oppelt from the National Symphony, his Dragonetti waltzes, and I didn't want to go too far down the creepy rabbit. I actually made this very creepy clip, and I deleted it because I just thought it would. But I want to make one that's just about that. So yeah, it's fascinating when you dig into. But I think I heard. All right, I did hear on one of those clips you've got on your website. You are a wake up in the middle of the night and start composing kind of person when you get an idea. Does that ring true? Is that what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially during sort of the COVID quarantine, when there's not really, I don't have anything at night anymore. Concerts at night. Even if I'm playing with the symphony, we record our stuff during the week, during the daytime, if it's going to stream later. So, not really any reason to stay up late for concerts or go out to hang out with my friends or sing karaoke in bars or whatever. So, yeah, a lot of evenings I'm asleep by 10 o'clock, and then I wake up at about 1 or so, and then work through the night.
So how do I just love how people work different. So how do the ideas, like walk me through some of that? Like, do you sit down at the piano and you start goofing around? Do you sit right in front of Sibelius and you start just like putting stuff on paper? Are you singing ideas into your iPhone or whatever device when you're walking around? Or like, how do those?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All of the above. Okay.
Yeah. Anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
It's mostly just, it starts in your head, if it's whatever, a concept for a piece, or a rhythm, or a chord progression, or a melody, a little fragment of something, and you just sit there and hammer at it and beg it until it turns into something else, something bigger, or it doesn't. It's kind of like, for me as a composer, if I feel like if I'm not throwing away at least about half of what I write, then whatever remains is not going to be up to the standard. You know what I mean? So a lot of editing.
I am so proud to have my course with Discover Double Bass, Beginner's Classical Bass, out in the world. This was a long time coming, friends, and this course is designed, as the name implies, for beginner bassists who want to learn how to play classical music, or for more experienced players who wish to revisit the foundations of technique. The course is comprised of 66 lessons over 4 hours and covers a wide range of topics on classical bass, which will make a real difference to you playing. It is the perfect course for beginners. I feel weird saying that since it's my course, but I definitely believe in it, to build a solid foundation of double bass technique and to help you feel confident playing. Many of the lessons include transcriptions of the pieces, exercises, and etudes, so you have everything you need to practice at home. I spent hundreds of hours putting this together over the last few years. I'm so glad to see it out in the world. We have a link to it in the show notes, or just visit discoverdouble-bass.com/Jason Heath. There is this mode in my practicing app, Modacity, which I totally love. It's called Deliberate Practice, and it's such a cool feature. Here's Modacity founder and CEO Mark Gelfo on how this works.
One of my pain points as a musician was like not really having a method to generate reliable improvement. And deliberate practice is like the scientific method for music practice. So what you do is you identify the one thing that you want to improve, be it articulation, intonation, emotion, comfort, whatever it is you want to improve, and brainstorm or choose one of the pre-suggested strategies for that area of improvement, and then test it out. Record yourself trying that strategy, listen back, and press yes, it worked, or no, it didn't work, to create that improvement.
It's such a clean way of tracking your progress. I do it every day, and it has done wonders for my bass playing and just my overall enthusiasm for music. You got to check it out. Modacity.co is the site, and if you go to our site, you can click through it and get a special offer for lifetime access for this app. Thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast, Modacity. What does your drafts folder look like? Because I always love like people who put out a lot of stuff. Does almost everything you do make it to the light of day, or do you have some like horrible archive of projects abandoned?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of unfinished things. There's a lot of non-starters. A lot of crap, a lot of junk, a lot of trash. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't throw it out. I mean, I keep it all, but maybe just to go look back on it someday and laugh. But
do you ever go back and find a hidden gem, or you have an idea from like 5 years ago and it's in that drafts folder? I mean, I never do that personally with my creative projects. I basically, I've never found anything in there when I do look back. But do you ever think, oh, that was a good idea, let's resurrect it and play around?
Maybe.
Okay.
But I think the further back you go, the more different a person you are. So
yeah.
Like if I'm different, if I wrote something 5 years ago, that was a different me. So I have to trust the current or the future me to come up with something better, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, have you ever spent time or encountered Shinji Shima in the San Francisco Opera? I don't know if you guys have ever run into each other or not.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so there are some parallels between your professional lives. So Shinji started composing maybe about 15 years ago. and the San Francisco Ballet, he's in the opera and the ballet. The ballet has played 3 of his ballets at this point. And they've gotten some performance. Yeah. And one of the first people when I moved to town here 4 or 5 years ago, I said, who should I talk to? And one of the most recommended people was Shinji Shima, because he's just got this really interesting career. And of course, he's like lives this billionaire playboy lifestyle. That's a bad way to put it, but he like drives a Ferrari or something like that down from the mountains every day.
Yeah, I do too. Totally. Oh, no. I drive a 2001 Explorer, actually.
Oh, okay. That close second.
It's got duct tape holding it together, basically.
But it's just interesting. And I have this crackpot theory that might not be true at all, but like it seems, and this could be just because I talk to so many bass players, but it seems like a lot of bass players end up becoming composers, end up becoming conductors, end up doing something a little more generative, maybe is the wrong word, but have you thought about that?
Or less boring?
Less boring. Yeah, okay, there we go. Do you think there's any correlation there between bass and why? I've gotten...
Well, sure. I mean, if somebody's a good enough musician to excel at their instrument to the point where they're employable steadily, and they sit in an orchestra, and then they realize, I'm playing the bass in an orchestra, and all these other instruments get to do all this wonderful stuff melodically and technically, and I love the bass so much, but half the time, and I love this too, but bum bum bum. And bass players count to 5. 1 5 1 5 1.
Right.
So, fortunately for me, I really enjoy doing that. I love accompanying people. I love playing the basic stuff, the fundamentals, and outlining the chords for them and the rhythm and stuff. But also, there's a certain freedom to let your mind wander a little bit. When you're playing the bass, you can. I mean, and of course, I sit in the section, so there's not as much pressure on me to focus as hard. But I shouldn't say that out loud. I guess my boss is going to be.
I know what you mean.
I guess the reward for me is I get to listen to all these great players on other instruments play what they're good at.
Yeah.
And it teaches me a lot as a composer to really, it's like I said, I didn't really study much composition in college. A lot of theory, yeah, but not composition. But in a sense, I get a composition lesson every time we're in rehearsal, and we're playing some Brahms or something, and there's no better teacher than that, just to sit there and hear it from the inside.
Yeah, there's something, some of my theories, there's something about the perspective that one has from the bass section too. First of all, you're playing those foundations, so you might be thinking structurally anyway, maybe different than if you're in the first violin section and you have a million notes to learn every and you're right under the conductor's nose. And then it's just something I've speculated about a lot. And so for you, because you were in the orchestra not composing really, and then you got really into composing, how did your perception of rehearsals and concerts change after you started composing? And I ask because I started conducting, not like a youth orchestra conductor, that's the level I got it. But I really started to change how I thought about rehearsals when I started to do that. And I also started to change how I thought about the structure of the music because I was analyzing scores more and doing that sort of thing. Did you notice a shift, or have you noticed a shift?
Maybe an evolution more than a shift.
Okay.
Shift sort of implies sort of suddenly, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess my perspective has evolved over the years, over the decades that I've been in this job. I value my role, the role of the bass player, more than ever, but I also value everybody else's role. The way it's like a neat little puzzle that fits together every time you sit down to work. What are the clarinets doing compared to the horns? What are the bassoons doing in relation to the violas? How loud can the trombones really play? Why am I not deaf yet?
Well, orchestration has got to be, that's something that I find so intimidating, even in my humble little projects. Like, I laid out a piece for guitar and bass that a student of mine was asking for. And, I'm like relying I started using Dorico just to try something new. And so, laying things out. But like, what has the process been like? I'm sure it's an ever again evolving process, but like just learning about how to write for the orchestra. I mean, I know you're sitting in there on a daily, weekly basis in an orchestra. So you see that, but still to actually sit down and think, how did you start getting into some of those classic orchestration textbooks, or was it just on the job or studying scores, or how did that evolve for you?
Yeah, there's score study and there's textbook study, but there's also feedback. Yeah, which is a great position, for a composer to be in. To know, I mean, all the people that play my music are my friends and colleagues. Yeah, so I can ask them anytime. Like, what didn't you like about this harp? Harp is really hard to write for.
I know. My wife's a harpist, so I can relate.
Yeah. So, and I'll learn things about harp, like enharmonics that make more sense for their, to wrap their hands around, and how fast you can shift, how many pedals, and I'll learn stuff from horn players. Like we did a thing of mine last year, and it was a commercial piece, but so I had not warned my friend who was sitting principal horn that this passage was a solo. It didn't say in the part. So I mean, it looked like a solo. It said, it's very melodic and stuff. But how would she know that? And she said, and I didn't. It didn't even occur to me because she's such a great player, and I wouldn't think that like being put on the spot like that would even matter. But then I thought, well, if I was put on the spot like that, I guess it would matter quite a bit. So little things like that, marking solos, and for me, like I hear backstage what players complain about, because I'm one of them, and I complain about the same stuff. And if we're playing something like Nielsen, I know we complain about exactly what we complain about. But if we're playing stuff like by a lot of modern composers that we play, a lot of times my dogs are barking. Yes, guys walking by. So a lot of the stuff that players complain about is not how good the music is, because our conductor and our artistic administrators, they pick good stuff. Right. The stuff they complain about is, how am I supposed to turn this page? There's no time, and why would you spell a scale like that? If it's an F major scale, why would you put a C double sharp in it? Yeah. So a lot of it is just simplicity and legibility. How easy it is for folks to parse and interpret the music, because the stuff that's easy to access for them is stuff that's easy to like, and the stuff that's hard to access because of just poor penmanship or whatever. I mean, that used to be a thing. Matter of fact, we part of my my job in the ASO. I'm not, my title is section bass player, and also I have a title called creative liaison. But also there's a lot of composing and arranging that goes on. One of the responsibilities they throw my way is anytime anything needs to be rearranged for the orchestra. And a piece they threw at me last a few months ago was this piece by a composer named Alvin Singleton, which was all handwritten, very poorly, and contained a whole bunch of random things like, here's a pitch set, improvise for a while, how many seconds, and every stave of the score was in a different time signature.
Oh.
And our conductor Robert Spano asked me if I could make some sense of this digitally. I was like, it's going to cost you, man. So, that's part. Being adept at using Sibelius is really been a lifesaver for me.
Yeah, you should do like Sibelius master classes. If you're doing something like that, that's got to be like that's the sort of stuff I'm breaking out into a cold sweat just thinking about.
I'm sure if I tried to, somebody would come up with a question that completely stumped me, and then I would be in the same cold sweat.
How much do your pieces? I'll share. I have a memory. Again, almost 20 years ago, of Edgar Meyer. We premiered his second bass concerto with that Iris Orchestra in Memphis, and maybe Edgar always writes this way, but we were at the rehearsals. We had like 2 rehearsals with Edgar. We did the first rehearsal, played the second movement, and then the next day, basically an entirely different second movement appeared. He had apparently rewritten the entire thing, the day before the premiere, and I don't even think it was maybe in the same key. Maybe it was in the same key, but it was like, do your pieces? I'm guessing they probably don't evolve like that. That's borderline. No. But do things change over time? With you get a premiere and you take the feedback that people had or something like that, or maybe you're so used to writing for ASO at this point that there's no, you kind of know.
No, there's always revision. Hopefully, leading up to a premiere, in the process of that, hopefully there's not so much revision that they can't just write it in themselves. Yeah. Because also. Another important skill for a composer is keeping the library happy. Mm-hmm. And if you say to the library every week, here's a revision of this part, they're gonna say pretty quickly, put their foot down on your butt, right, or something, right, and let you know that that's not okay. After the premiere, there's some revision too. If you're lucky enough to get a second performance or recording or whatever, there's some revision that goes on, but. Most of that I can do myself on Sibelius, so it's not really a library issue so much as just a printer issue.
Right. Where would somebody even? This is probably an impossible question, so apologies in advance. But let's say some 18-year-old's listening to this and has been thinking about writing, it's not everybody gets to have their pieces played by the Atlanta Symphony, but let's say they want to go down and deeper. Like, where would somebody even start to develop some of those skills if they're not, on the side?
A couple things.
Yeah.
Write every chance you get for any possible occasion you have. Anybody who's willing to play anything you write, write them something. You're not going to get paid at first. So take every opportunity to write for any ensemble you can possibly who might be willing to do it, because it's like I said before, composing is a discipline. It's not just an inspiration thing. Mm-hmm. And if you have the discipline to write for some group that you're unfamiliar with or an orchestration you don't know, and you're willing to sit there and learn it, and in the process, you're a much better composer at the end of it. Second thing is, know that a lot of what you write is going to be awful at first, and people are not going to like it or accept it just because they like you or whatever. If there's something that's not good, it's not going to get played, or it's not going to get played twice anyway. Mm-hmm. So be willing to face a lot of rejection. Mm-hmm. I consider myself kind of a successful composer at this point. Yeah, I get rejected all the time. I submit stuff to competitions and calls for scores that are always routinely rejected. So
that's going to be a hard one to swallow. And I know we face rejection when we're auditioning or anything like that, but I have a former roommate named Bjorn Burkhout who teaches composition at Queensborough College in New York. And I just remember that poor guy, the level of rejection that he's like, nope, didn't get into that one. Yeah. We lived together maybe 4 or 5 years. I think he got one thing, successfully placed in some composition competition.
It's similar, like in bass playing, I always kind of believe that if you're good enough to advance, you're good enough to win a job someday, somewhere. If you're the right player for the job, you're good enough. If you've advanced, especially to finals, composition's kind of similar. If you've had some success, consider yourself a success. Judge yourself on those, learn from the failures, but don't assess your own merits based on failing.
Yeah.
And so it's, I've been played by some orchestras. I'm still I've written several things for the ASO that have not ever been played and are not on the schedule. Maybe I'll shop them around. Maybe we'll see if anybody else wants to pick them up. But, there's, just because they're my friends, that doesn't mean they're going to play everything I write.
Yeah.
There's a lot of composers out there. And fortunately for the world right now, it's a great time to be a woman or a minority composer, honestly, because we're a lot of orchestras are really, really dialing that in. Yeah. And really maximizing the exposure of underrepresented composers, which I think is way overdue.
Right.
And for my part, I would gladly give up my shot at my next premiere for somebody who deserves it more, because they've had, a much more uphill battle than I have.
Yeah. Yeah. It's gotta be, I don't know if I can articulate this well, but you don't advance an audition, and it feels like it's maybe a little bit more objective, maybe not, but it's like, okay, I can do this, I can fix this or fix that. With something that's so like from your own mind, like a composition, is that hard, or was that hard when you didn't get things composite? It seems to me like it might feel like more of a personal rejection. Like I remember interviewing for a university job and not getting it, and that felt so much worse than not advancing an audition, because the audition is like, well, I didn't play Beethoven 5, but then the university one was like, I don't like you, and your big dumb face. And I know that's not true, but did you struggle with that at all?
It's true. They told me later that it was your big dumb face they didn't like.
Right.
No. Yeah, I see what you mean, but I think for whatever reason, fortune smiled on me, the universe, karma, whatever. I started small, have some friends who play some chamber music. They asked me to write some little things for them. I wrote, little, very small scale stuff, little, like a 2-minute little waltz or something, and it grew from there. I didn't start off writing orchestra music. I mean, I kind of did, but that was in high school. The orchestra music I was writing then was awful. I mean, really, really just unlistenably awful. So that's where I hadn't had any success at that point, because I was aiming a little too high, I think.
Michael, thank you so much for chatting. Hopefully this is the first of many conversations, and I am so excited to get into these titles from the sheet music store that we have been working on. Michael has been an integral part. He was really the person who had the idea for this sheet music store a few years ago at this point, and I have been working on some of his music. I'm going to be filming some videos in coming weeks. Hopefully there will be one out by the time this episode goes out, so we shall see. Maybe not, actually, because I think I'm going to take the weekend off. I do these intros here in early 2021 and kind of through most of 2020 unedited. I just try to give myself a chance to let it rip, so we'll see what happens. My wife is on the phone in the other room, so if you hear some background noise, that would be it. And yeah, this sheet music store has been going great, in my opinion, since we launched it. It was really the idea, well, it was Michael's idea, and then Trevor Jones, my colleague here on the podcast, we work on many projects associated with this podcast and the blog and the sheet music store together. He really took the reins on this, and I'm so impressed with the results. We're nearing 100 titles. We might actually have over 100 titles right now. doublebassblog.org/music will take you there, and you can search by solo bass or duo or bass quartet or bass and piano or by composer or arranger or that kind of thing. I'm excited about it, if you can't tell, and I've had too much coffee. I always do these episodes in batches of 4. This is the first of 4. I'd have to take the dog out for a walk, so I'm going to be brief on this outro and just say, if you want to get in touch, feedback at Contrabass Conversations is a great way to do it. I love to hear from people. It warms my heart when I open my email, and that is something that usually doesn't warm my heart, but it does when I open it up and I see messages from people that listen to this show. It kind of freaks me out that people actually listen to this show still after 13 years or 14 years or however long I've been doing this. I sort of think it's just me talking into my laptop like a maniac, but no, people listen. And so it makes me super happy when I hear hear from you. So thank you for listening. Thank you to the team that put these episodes together with me. They are Michael Cooper, Steve Hinchy, Mitch Mooring, Trevor Jones, and Krista Copper. Mitch makes beautiful basses just east of Dallas, Fort Worth. Learn more at mitchmooring.com. I am your host, Jason Heath, and we will see you again soon for more life in the low end of the spectrum.